You ever seen a neighborhood vanish beneath water like it never existed? No warning, no mercy, just silence, ... then the roar. That wasn't an accident. That was me. And this is the story they never wanted out. You see, when people hear HOA, they think newsletters, lawn rules, and nosy neighbors peeking through blinds. But let me tell you what an HOA really is. It's a cartel in khakis. It's organized control under the disguise of community. And if you're not watching close, they'll build an empire on your blood without blinking. That's what they did to me. 35 homes built right on land that's been in my family since the Civil War. Land I paid taxes on, fenced, cared for, and legally owned. And they stole it, not with guns, but with pens, politics, and paperwork. It started quiet survey flags, trucks parked on the shoulder. I called the county. They said they'd look into it. But every week, another concrete foundation poured, another roof raised. I showed deeds, historic maps, photos of my grandfather tilling that soil. They called it a clerical oversight. Told me to talk to the HOA, but see, I don't talk to thieves. I study them, I listen, I dig, and what I found was a rabbit hole so deep it might drown us all. Because this wasn't just about me. It wasn't just 35 homes. It was a blueprint, a pattern, a quiet war happening across the country. They call it eminent domain light. HOA lobbies by land use loopholes. Counties approve new zoning behind closed doors. Developers mistakenly claim unused parcels. Then build fast, faster than courts can intervene. They rely on your silence, your confusion, your fear, and they laugh at the idea you'd ever fight back. But here's what they didn't know. That land had history, more than just paper. It had secrets. My great-grandfather dug a diversion dam in the 30s, flood control for the orchard. The HOA didn't know it still worked, didn't know I maintained it, didn't even ask. They were so obsessed with the square footage, they forgot to respect the roots beneath it. So I waited, watched them finish every home, sell every lot, move in with smiles and plastic flamingos. Then I turned one valve, and I watched the flow. And that was just the beginning. People ask me now if I regret it, opening that dam, watching all that water swallow their driveways, creep into their kitchens, soak their carpet dreams. They ask if I feel guilt if I sleep at night, and I'll tell you what I told the sheriff when he came knocking. You ever watch a man steal? Your life with a smile. I slept just fine, because this wasn't revenge, it was revelation, a message, a reckoning that had been earned inch by inch over years of arrogance and silence. You see, most people don't understand how the system's wired. They think justice is blind, but it isn't. It's just looking the other way. Money tilts her scales, and these HOAs, they know how to feed that imbalance. They didn't just steal my land, they erased me. When I protested, they buried me in legal noise. Cease and desists, restraining orders. One even claimed I was trespassing on land my family had bled to protect. They weaponized bureaucracy. They made sure I couldn't afford to fight them. In court, and the banks. In on it, developers too. All hands shaking behind closed doors, while they told me to calm down, to trust the process. But there was no process. There was only theft in slow motion. And I realized then, the only language they understood was force, not violence. Nature, gravity, truth that can't be debated in a courtroom or scrubbed. From a PDF, truth that comes in waves. The dam had been dormant for decades. Nobody remembered it. It was fed by an underground spring and a system of culverts the HOA never mapped because they were too busy measuring pool dimensions and fencing color codes. They thought they had control, but control is an illusion. You build on ground you never truly owned. So when I cracked that gate, just slightly at first, I didn't do it with hate. I did it with clarity. Let the water speak. Let it flow where it used to flow before concrete and greed. Dammed it up in the name of profit. The first house flooded within 6 hours. Basement first, then the lower level, then 2 more homes. It was slow, deliberate, natural. They thought it was a freak occurrence, a one-off storm, but the skies were clear. I stood on the ridge and watched, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because I wanted them to understand. This land remembers, and now so would they. The HOA president called me that night. His voice was trembling, not with fear, but with entitlement, like he couldn't comprehend what was happening, like nature had broken some unspoken rule. By not obeying his clipboard, he said, "You need to fix this." And I just stood there, holding that old valve wrench, listening to a man who thought contracts could hold back a flood. I told him, "This is the fix. Understand something. These people thought they were kings. They built cul-de-sacs like castles, planted HOA bylaws like flags. But this wasn't their kingdom. It was mine. And the truth is, I warned them. More than once, I sent letters, showed them survey markers, even invited their board to walk the land. But arrogance is deaf. They thought I was just some bitter old holdout, someone they could outlast. But land isn't like stock. It remembers who walked it, who cared for it, who listened. They paved over my family's orchard, dug up trees that fed generations, put swing sets where my grandmother planted herbs, and they thought I'd just watch from my porch and smile. No doubt what they don't teach you in school, what they never print in newspapers, is that sometimes the only justice left is elemental. Water doesn't lie. It doesn't negotiate. It follows gravity, history, and truth. It finds its path and takes it, slow and sure. By sunrise, 7 homes were under mandatory evacuation. News vans showed up. Unexplained flooding, they called it. Experts speculated on burst pipes, rising water tables, climate anomalies. Not one of them mentioned the old diversion dam, a mile uphill. Not one asked why it was built or who maintained it, because that would have meant admitting they never really understood the land they built on. And here's the kicker. The dam wasn't illegal. It was on my property. It always had been, registered, documented, maintained. Every valve, every ditch, every spillway. The HOA had built their kingdom below a loaded gun and never stopped to ask who held it. I wasn't hiding. I was watching. Watching them mow lawns over stolen soil. Watching them host barbecues over my family's graves. Watching them pretend. History started the day their escrow closed. But history doesn't forget. And water. Water always finds a way back home. Asterisk, they came with lawyers next. Not questions, not apologies, lawyers, clipboards, in suits. The kind that smile like they've already won. They walked my land like it was theirs, pointing at things they didn't understand, whispering in legal tongues, talking about injunctions and damages and undue harm. Harm, that was the word they used, as if harm hadn't been done already. Years before the first drop of water ever moved, I listened. I let them talk. I let them spin their web of jargon and threats. But here's the thing about paper. It burns. Truth doesn't. Truth just waits. Like water behind a dam, they said, I endangered lives. I said they endangered legacies. They said I interfered with residential safety. I said they trespassed on ancestral rights. Every argument they threw at me bounced off like rain on stone. Why? Because they had no foundation. Just documents signed by people who never touched the soil, never felt the weight of it, never looked a hawk in the eye, and knew this place meant something. And I could see it in their faces. The shift, the dawning realization that maybe they hadn't done all their homework. That maybe I wasn't some isolated lunatic with a wrench and a grudge. Maybe I was something worse, someone who knew exactly what he was doing, because what they didn't realize, what no one outside the old families around here realizes, is that land isn't just dirt, it's memory, it's law, it's stories passed down not on paper, but in calluses and scars. And when you disrespect that, when you build over bones and pretend they're just rocks, the earth remembers, and sometimes it answers back. One of the lawyers, a younger guy, tried to play smart, told me the dam had to be dismantled for public safety, that it was a liability. I looked him right in the eye and said, then evacuate. Because I'm not. Moving, I didn't have to raise my voice. The land spoke louder than I ever could. The creek was running faster now. The water, clearer, freer, for the first time in decades. It was flowing the way it was always meant to, and for the first time, they started to understand. This wasn't just about water. It was about consequences. Centuries buried don't stay buried forever. They thought they could outlast me. Thought they could wait me out, let time wear me down like they wore down every other soul who dared speak up. But see, they didn't understand the kind of patience a man learns when he's raised by the land. You spend your life fixing fences in a storm, harvesting by moonlight, learning when to act and when to let nature do the work. I wasn't waiting, I was watching, and they were giving me everything. By week 2, the neighborhood was chaos. Pumps humming day and night, sandbags lining sidewalks like war trenches, news crews trying to get sound bites from families who didn't even know how to spell easement, let alone what one meant, and all the while, that water just kept flowing, slow, persistent, unbothered. The HOA board held emergency meetings. They sent out frantic emails, trying to rally residents. But fear is a funny thing. It eats loyalty, starts fights, turns neighbors into strangers. Some of those homeowners started digging into the purchase records, and guess what they found? Missing documentation, title discrepancies, incomplete disclosures. See, when you build fast and cheap, you don't dot all your I's. You assume no one's looking. But now, everyone was looking, and that's when the cracks started showing. Not in the foundations, in the story. Their version of how this all happened. Suddenly, the HOA claimed they were misled by the developer. The developer blamed the county. The county said they'd review internal protocols. You know what that is? That's the sound of a tower falling. One lie at a time. Here's what really scared them. People started listening to me. They came up that ridge, quiet, humble, curious. Not all of them, just a few. Folks who realized this wasn't black and white. That maybe the man they called the crazy old landowner wasn't crazy at all. Maybe he just remembered what they forgot. That land can't be stolen, only borrowed. And if you borrow it wrong, it takes itself back. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just showed them the old irrigation maps, the original plats, the journals my grandfather kept in pencil showing flood paths from 80 years ago. Some of them cried because for the first time they realized they weren't victims of a flood, they were victims of hubris. And the water was just telling the truth. Asterisk. The sheriff came back on the 15th day. This time, he wasn't bluffing. He brought county engineers, some environmental consultant, even a drone team to assess the situation. They didn't speak to me right away. They hovered at the base of the ridge, looking up like I was some kind of outlaw on a throne of dirt. But this wasn't defiance. It was defense of something older than law, older than them. He finally approached, tried to sound reasonable, said, "You're forcing us into a corner." I looked at him and said, "No, you just finally ran out of exits." He wanted to talk impact. But impact started when they ignored my letters, when they laughed in my face at the zoning meeting, when they buried my fence posts under asphalt. The real impact was when a piece of paper said, my heritage didn't matter because someone else had deeper pockets. I walked them to the dam, let them see it up close, the old steel, the stonework. Not a crude sabotage like they assumed. No, a legacy built by hands tougher than theirs, built to work, not just to pass inspection. And it was all intact, legal, maintained. Every single part in accordance with original use. Their consultant looked nervous. He couldn't find a single code violation. Couldn't find a reason to declare it unsafe because it wasn't. It was just inconvenient to them. The sheriff asked me what I wanted. I said for the truth to matter again. He didn't have an answer. But deep down, I think he got it. Maybe he remembered his grandfather's land being taken. Maybe he'd seen too many cases where the law was just a velvet curtain over a steel cage. Whatever the reason, he didn't arrest me. Didn't shut the dam, he just nodded, told the engineers to back off, and left. And that was the moment I realized something had shifted. The system was cracking, not just because of the water, but because the narrative, the one they built their HOA kingdom on, was failing. People weren't buying the lies anymore. They were asking questions, and questions are dangerous when the truth's been buried. They wanted to fight me in court, fine, but now they'd have to do it with open eyes, with the whole town watching, with residents realizing they bought homes not just on flood zones, but on fraud, and all I had to do was keep letting the truth flow. Asterisk, by the 3rd week, the HOA was bleeding, not water, money. Lawsuits started coming from inside their own ranks, homeowners banding together, demanding accountability, demanding to know how they ended up living on land without clean title, without disclosure, without protection. You could smell the panic. Their polished facade was cracking, and behind it, cowards with clipboards. Some of those board members quit overnight, just walked away, packed up and left, like rats off a sinking ship. Because when people realized the ground they stood on was borrowed from me, all those petty regulations about mailbox height and trash bin placement started to look like a bad joke. What good is an HOA rulebook when the very soil beneath your home is slipping away? And me? I didn't have to lift a finger. All I did was not stop the water. That's what they'll never admit. Their collapse wasn't caused by sabotage. It was caused by arrogance. They ignored history. They ignored law. And worst of all, they ignored the land itself. It was their pride that flooded those homes, not my hand. Let me tell you something most people never learn until it's too late. Systems only work when people believe in them. That belief is what gives paper its power. But once you expose the lie, once people see the gears and grease behind the curtain, it all falls apart. And that's what was happening now. The HOA was no longer an authority. It was a punchline. One night, a young couple came knocking on my cabin door. They'd bought one of the houses closest to the flood line. 2 kids, terrified. But not of me, of what they didn't know. They asked me for the truth, so I gave it to them. I laid it out, the zoning corruption, the falsified plats, the missing deeds. I showed them the map from 1946, where their house sat underwater during a historic flood. That dam didn't create a problem, it just reminded everyone what nature already knew. They cried, thanked me, and then they did something I didn't expect. They moved out, voluntarily, packed their things, and left. Before the next rain came, said they'd rather start over on honest land than build a future on a lie. And in that moment, I knew something had shifted deeper than water lines. People weren't just waking up, they were remembering. A storm rolled in on the 26th day. Not a monster, not a hurricane, just a steady, stubborn rain. The kind of rain that doesn't scream, but whispers, seeps, accumulates. The kind that tests the land, tests your choices. And I knew what it meant. Knew it would push everything past the point of denial. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window, watching the water move. Watching it snake through the old channels it had carved over generations, the ones the HOA paved over. The ones the developers ignored, the ones the county lost in their records. But the land didn't forget. It guided every drop with purpose, as if reclaiming something sacred. By morning, 15 more homes had taken water. Not a flash flood, not an act of God, an act of truth, slow, unstoppable, honest. The news couldn't spin it anymore. The narrative was unraveling. Local outlets started pulling up historical records, old floodplain reports, geological surveys. My name came up more and more, no longer as the villain, but as a man with receipts, a man who warned them, a man who understood the terrain they built their lives on better than any city planner ever would. And that's when the real calls started coming. Not from HOA lawyers, not from angry homeowners, but from people with power. Quiet voices, off the record, officials, developers, real estate agents, they wanted to work something out. Said there might be a path to compromise. Compromise. Where was compromise when they ripped my boundary markers out of the ground and dumped them in a ditch? Where was compromise when they trespassed, built fences across my pastures, and told me it was a paperwork glitch? They wanted compromise now because they were afraid, not of me, but of consequences. I told every one of them the same thing. I'm not stopping the water. I'm not going to interfere with what nature's doing. You built on the wrong side of history. All I did was remind it, because this was never about revenge. It was about memory, about accountability, about showing the world that sometimes the only way to be heard is through the silence that comes after the flood. The houses would dry, maybe some would be bulldozed, maybe lawsuits would fly. But one thing would never be rebuilt the same. Trust. They broke it, and the water made sure. The cracks were visible to everyone. The dams, still open, not wide, just enough. Enough for the stream to run as it once did, long before permits and plots and homeowners' dues tried to tame it. It's quiet now. No more lawyers, no more threats. The HOA board dissolved. Most of them gone, scattered like leaves in a current they never understood. The developers stopped returning calls. The insurance companies refusing payouts left and right, claiming acts of nature. And in a way, they're not wrong, because that's exactly what it was. See, what they never grasped, what they were never taught in all their tidy suburban plans, is that nature doesn't forget what's been buried. It just waits for the arrogance to reach its peak, for concrete to crack, for the soil to whisper. Now, and when it moves, it doesn't rage, it reclaims. That water didn't rush, it returned. And it took with it the illusion that paper ownership means anything when the earth itself disagrees. And now the land is quiet again. The birds returned. The deer drink from the creek like they used to. The ridge is green, unbothered, but more than that, respected. People walk it now like sacred ground. They step carefully, speak softly. They ask permission. Not from me, from the place itself. And that's what this was always about. This wasn't about homes. This was about hubris. The kind that tells you a property line on a screen is stronger than 100-year flood. Memory, the kind that builds playgrounds on riverbeds and calls it progress. But progress without memory is just repetition in disguise and repetition on stolen land. That's a reckoning waiting to happen. I've had offers, of course, land developers, now humbled, waving blank checks, TV crews wanting to turn it into a documentary, even environmental groups asking to partner. I tell them all the same thing. This land doesn't belong to stories anymore. It belongs to the truth. And the truth is, the only thing I ever did was stop lying with them. I let the land speak. I let the water go home. You want to know the secret? Nobody tells you. The most powerful force in the world isn't fire or wealth or politics. It's remembrance. And when remembrance flows downhill, it doesn't care what you've built. It simply goes where it always belonged. And God help the man who tries to stand in its way. Asterisk, so here we are. Full circle, the water's found its path. The lawsuits are buried in courtrooms, the houses mostly empty, and the ridge breathes again. You'd think this is where I'd say, I feel victorious, vindicated, like justice was finally served. But the truth, it's quieter than that, heavier, because this wasn't a victory. It was a reckoning. And reckonings don't end in applause, they end in silence. I walk the line now. The old trail my father cleared runs parallel to the creek, just above the bend where the largest house once stood. You can still see the concrete foundation half collapsed, sunken, moss already creeping. Nature doesn't wait long once you give it permission. It moves fast when it's finally unchained. And that's what this was. Unchaining. Not just water, me. They tried to rewrite my story. Turned me into a cautionary tale recluse, a bitter man with a dam and a grudge. But here's what they never saw. I wasn't angry. I was awake. And once you're awake, once you see what really matters, what's real, what's fabricated, what's sacred, you can't go back. You can't just nod and sign and smile and pretend. I didn't destroy anything. I revealed it, and if that makes people uncomfortable, good. Maybe they'll look harder next time before they buy land on someone else's bones. Maybe they'll ask questions. Maybe they'll wonder why that stream bends wide in the middle of the field, or why that old man watches from the porch without saying a word. Maybe they'll learn to listen before they build, because the land is watching, always has been, and when it speaks through water, through wind, through roots splitting sidewalks, isn't asking for permission, it's asking for respect. So, no, I didn't win. There was never a game to begin with, just a truth that had waited too long to rise. And I simply stepped out of the way. Let it pass. Let it return. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone stands on stolen earth and calls it theirs, they'll remember this story. Maybe they'll hesitate. Maybe they'll feel it, that hum in the soil, that pull in the air telling them, this place remembers everything, and that water always comes back for what was taken.